Hello and welcome. My name is Brian Hopkins. I use he, him, his programs, and I have the esteemed honor of serving as ACPA's Director of Convention and Events. Today, I'd like to welcome you to our ACPA 24 team webinar entitled ACPA 25 team webinar. Don't listen to me right there, called Creating an Accessible Program, all about ensuring that our programs at the ACPA 25 convention are as accessible as humanly possible. With that being said, today's webinar is being closed captioned, and those captions can be accessed by clicking the caption button at the bottom of your screen. I'm going to begin today by reading our ACPA land acknowledgement. Related to our mission of supporting and fostering learning through the generation and sharing of knowledge, ACPA, College Student Educators International, would like to acknowledge the land each of us is on today in the original homelands of Indigenous and tribal nations. We acknowledge the painful history of genocide and forced removal from these territories, and we honor and respect the many diverse Indigenous peoples still connected to this land. At this time, I am going to go ahead and transition and pass things off to our esteemed presenters today. To get those introductions started off with, I'm going to introduce Matt Hansen-Cooter.
Hi, everyone. My name is Matt Hansen-Cooter. I go by he, him, his pronouns, and I am the program chair for ACPA25. And I'm going to pass it off to Erin.
Hi, everyone. My name is Erin Mayo, she, her pronouns, and I serve as the ACPA 25 Accessibility Advisor. I will pass it over to Ashley.
Hi, everyone. I'm Ashley Goodereis. I use she, her pronouns, and I serve as one of the co-admin chairs for ACPA 25, and I will pass it over to Hannah.
Hi, y'all. Hannah, she, hers. I am the presenter resources coordinator for ACPA 25 on the convention planning team, and happy to be here. I think I'm the last one, so I don't have anybody to pass to.
Yeah, so I will go ahead and get started. So why is this important? It's something that we really wanted to emphasize this year in terms of kind of a collaboration between the program team and Erin with accessibility to make sure that presenters understand the importance of why you should make your presentations accessible and some ways to do that. So we're going to be going through some different examples and stuff as we move forward. So why is this important? Well, first of all, we want to connect it to the ACPA mission, advocating for equitable and inclusive learning environments, also connecting it to ACPA values of inclusiveness and access to association-wide involvement and decision-making, and active engagement with issues of inequity within higher education, as well as within membership association in order to better serve our membership. And it also promotes universal design. And hopefully all of you as presenters want to make sure that who's ever coming to your presentation are able to see, hear, experience, understand what you're presenting, and making sure that it is available to them with whatever means they utilize. So now that we've discussed why this is important to frame our work, let's go into details of how you can implement universal design and accessibility into your program sessions. So you may be familiar with a concept called person-first language that is a commonly adopted practice when referring to individuals with disabilities. When individuals are encouraged to utilize person-first language, the primary purpose is to emphasize the wholeness of an individual simply beyond the stigma of certain labels. Person-first language encourages individuals to utilize the schema of person or people with blank. The schema is widely adopted, is still considered appropriate and inclusive in many different contexts. We're referring to individuals with disabilities and discussing disability. So person-first language is kind of, the purpose is to emphasize the wholeness of individuals simply beyond the stigma of a certain label. For example, Erin has a learning disability. Whereas identity first is not shying away from identifying someone as a disabled person, precedes a recent return to the schema. The use of identity-first language, such as a deaf individual, autistic student, or disabled person, encourages us to understand that there's a set of common lived experiences among disabled individuals that shift our conceptualization of disability to more of an identity-based understanding. So again, it's kind of identifying someone as a label and then connecting with them. So for example, Jordan is diabetic. The association welcomes the usage of identity-first language to destigmatize negative connotations associated with disability and to support the reframing of how disability is considered throughout the acknowledgement and empowerment of one's humanity. If someone is using identity-first language, please do not correct them. Some identities prefer identity-first language, including deaf community, autistic, and some others. When in doubt, ask the person if they prefer person-first or identity-first language.
Awesome.
So now I'm going to turn it over to Erin to talk about some digital slide accessibility.
Awesome. Thanks, Matt. So we're gonna kind of talk about how to make your slides both accessible from the written context as well as the visual context. And we have some really great examples we're gonna talk through as well. So the best defense against making things inaccessible is you. So utilize the accessibility checker in Microsoft, utilize Google Slides. You can also put a QR code on the first slide of your PowerPoint to promote universal design so that folks can pull it up on like the laptop that they might have in the session to follow along. So that is definitely helpful for folks. So definitely just make sure that before you utilize it, like use the Microsoft Accessibility Checker because then you can go back and fix all the errors that might be in the PowerPoint. Things to think about around written content, really making sure that your titles are meaningful. So don't just put like ACPA 101 presentation on 10 different slides. Make them unique to the content of what's happening on that slide. Using an accessible font style is really helpful for folks with dyslexia or other disabilities so that you can clearly tell each letter apart. So calligraphy is not really accessible. Making sure that your font size is big enough, between 16 and 24 for folks that might be visually impaired or have other disabilities. Using headers and subheaders, which will help with screen readers. A lot of folks are using screen readers now. And then create well-balanced slides. Don't put all the content in like one half of the slide, but really evenly distribute it. So that's important. So we're going to talk through an example slide, and then hopefully you can identify some things that aren't accessible. So this is an example. So if you want to put in the chat or ideas about what is inaccessible on this slide, then we can kind of talk through. So take a minute or so and think about what might be inaccessible. And if you want to unmute and share, we would love to hear that as well. So now that you've had a few minutes to think, so there was plenty of things that were inaccessible on that previous slide. The font size was way too small, as well as it was hard to read with the yellow font. In addition, the title wasn't really meaningful, so you could fix that by saying discussion question number 1, student development theory application. The font on the right-hand side was calligraphy, which was not readable, as well as the content wasn't evenly distributed on the slide. In addition, that flashing GIF wasn't relevant and had no description. So it really shouldn't have been on the slide to begin with. As much as it was fun, it shouldn't have been there. So now that we've talked about written content, let's talk about some visual content. Really thinking about ensuring that there's accessible color contrast, adding alternative text to the image, and then if you're using videos, making sure that there's closed captioning, because sessions are often loud and some people really need to follow along. In addition, if you're using tables, making sure that the table is accessible with headers and labels on the columns and rows. And then making sure that you check the reading order of the slides, which really helps with folks that are using screen readers to make sure that it makes logical sense. So color theory, really, as you kind of go down, the first one that says more challenging to read. It has a pink background, and then it gets more challenging to read as you go down. So the second one is a dark maroon background with black font color. And then the third one is lime green background with white font, and that is pretty challenging to read. So making sure that there are high contrast colors, and utilize the ACPA25 slide deck for your PowerPoints when it comes out, because that will be accessible. So we definitely encourage folks to utilize those templates. So we have another example. Hold on, there it goes. Think about what are some things that are inaccessible on this slide. So take a few seconds and then we'll kind of go through. So some things that were super inaccessible on that slide was they weren't using the ACPA slide deck. The lime green background was definitely not accessible. There were some words that were bolded, but definitely really be clear about if that content is important and why it's bolded. We couldn't tell from here, but there was no alternative text on that image. That image is actually from Long Beach. So making sure that it's accessible, the red font color on the green background is not the best. So utilize the accessibility checker. Try not to limit PDFs unless you plan on making them accessible. Really sharing out view-only documents allows the documents to keep their formatting, which is really helpful. So with that, I will turn it over to Hannah.
Hello again. Thanks, Erin. So now that we've discussed how to make our slides both accessible in the written and visual way, we're going to discuss some strategies to ensure accessibility around the facilitation of your session. So one of the first things is a microphone. So when a microphone is present in the room of your education session, presenters are expected to utilize the mic at all times when speaking. Often there's a second microphone that might be available in the room to facilitate accessible and inclusive discussions. So presenters are really encouraged to share their microphone with others as well. Alternatively, presenters can summarize and repeat back comments and questions shared by attendees before continuing with their own response to the question or comment posed. That can really help to make sure that everybody heard it. The microphone is helpful for folks who are hard of hearing or who may be sitting at the back of the room. We ask that you hold the microphone below or kind of to the side of your mouth to avoid breathing into it. Totally hear and want to acknowledge that using a mic can be really anxiety producing, but it really does allow for full participation of attendees in your session. So we really ask that you try to use it. Sign language interpreting and real-time captioning will be available in all of our major and large-scale sessions, but not in individual sessions unless someone requests it. For auto captioning, this can really help folks who might be deaf or hard of hearing, folks with lower processing speed, folks who have their first language is not English, and so on. There are a couple different resources that will make sure that get to you of how to use PowerPoint, Google Slides, Google Chrome to ensure auto captioning is present. It's also really helpful to put the auto captioning at the top of the screen so that folks in the back can see it. Often when it's down at the bottom, really only the front row can see it. When presenting on content, presenters are encouraged to consider the ways in which they can both visually and audibly represent the content and messages critical to the outcomes of their educational session. When the importance of something is just visually represented, like bolded or differently colored, like Erin just touched on, or it's just audibly presented, so maybe giving a description of the importance, this can limit the ability for everyone attending to achieve all of the outcomes you've set out to accomplish. Lastly, on this one, when planning for the timing of all activities that are part of your presentation, make sure that you're considering the needs of those individuals who have differences in information processing time or individuals who might need more time physically to accomplish a task. Providing ample and proper amount of time for all attendees to complete an activity as part of your education session helps you more properly accomplish the outcomes of your session than facilitating too many activities in too little time. You won't know if folks in your session have a disability beforehand, so it's best to create your presentation with universal design in mind up front. It may also be helpful to include how much time folks will have for discussion and give them a 1 or 2 minute warning to wrap up as you're kind of bringing folks back together. So new for ACPA this year, ACPA acknowledges that each attendee comes to sessions with their own life experiences. In order to best facilitate attendees' informed decision-making about whether and how to engage in convention activities, we're encouraging presenters to provide content advisories. Examples of content advisories might include, but also not limited to, ableism, self-harm, hate speech, sexual assault, racism, homophobia, transphobia, and eating disorders. There will be a form available that folks can fill out to have these added to your program. Content advisories will be listed in the last line of the session description in the program book if you're filling out that form to have them included. In addition, we're encouraging presenters who have content advisories in their sessions to also put a statement on a slide directly following the land acknowledgement slide. So the following is an example template wording that you can use in your presentation. So you can say, in order to facilitate your informed decision-making about whether and how to engage in this convention activity, please be advised that this program session includes content regarding the following subjects. And then you all can fill in your subjects. If you find that a checklist is helpful for you, I know it's helpful for me, be sure to review this document as you plan your educational session. It can be really helpful, and it was just dropped in the chat. Thanks, Ashley. So that can be really helpful as you're kind of planning through your presentation. And lastly, here are our resources. Those will be available to you. And just want to thank you for being here today. And I guess I'll turn it back over to Matt or Erin for any questions.
Yeah, so if folks have questions, they can email convention.programs@acpa.nche.edu, and we'll be more than happy to answer questions. And more info will be coming from the convention team with more resources. So thanks all for coming.
Thank you, everyone.